Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're really diving deep into a topic that's, well, feels like it's everywhere these days. Diabetes.
Yeah, it's unavoidable.
Exactly. We're zeroing in on understanding diabetes in 2024 from the advocate voice. And, for our listeners who are already familiar with our deep dives, we're not just skimming the surface
All
here.
right, we're going deep.
We are. So, even if you think you have a handle on diabetes, get ready for some really fascinating insights, I think, from this article.
Yeah, what I find so interesting about diabetes is that, everyone's heard of it, but when you really start digging into the details, it can feel kind of mysterious. Like, what's actually going on when someone says their pancreas isn't working right?
It's true.
Or why is everyone suddenly so obsessed with this A1C test? So yeah, get ready to impress your doctor at your next checkup with all this knowledge.
Okay, so picture this. It's 2045, and get this, almost 700 million adults worldwide are living with diabetes. That's like, what, almost 1 in 10 adults on the entire planet?
It's a staggering number.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, thinking about that, chances are you probably already know someone impacted by diabetes, or, you will at some point.
Yeah.
Which is why, it just highlights how crucial it is to really understand this condition, right?
Absolutely. And, it all begins with, like you said, understanding the basics. So think of glucose, sugar, as the fuel that our bodies run on.
Yeah, like premium gas.
Exactly. It keeps everything running smooth. Now, insulin is kind of like the key. It unlocks our cells and lets that glucose in, to provide energy. But with diabetes, this whole intricate system, it's like it hits a roadblock.
So the key isn't quite working.
Yeah, it's like a key that's maybe a little bit bent out of shape. It might work sometimes, but other times
It gets stuck.
it gets stuck, exactly. And depending on, I guess, how bent that key is, or, in this case, how the body is malfunctioning, we categorize diabetes into different types. And the article does a nice job, I think, of laying out those different types. We've got type 1, type 2, gestational diabetes. They each have their own kind of quirks, but they all ultimately come down to the body struggling to effectively use insulin.
Okay, so let's break down those types a little bit, starting with type 1. What's going on in the body with that type?
Okay, so with type 1 diabetes, what happens is the body's immune system, the system that's supposed to protect us from all the bad stuff, well, it mistakenly attacks and destroys the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas.
Oh, wow. So it's like friendly fire.
It is. It's like your own security system turning against you and shutting down the power grid.
That's a scary thought. So essentially, the body is left without a way to make the insulin it desperately needs.
Exactly. And without insulin, well, glucose can't get into the cells, leading to a buildup of sugar in the bloodstream. And this can cause a whole domino effect of issues throughout the body.
And that brings us to type 2 diabetes, which I understand is by far the more common type. Is that right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Type 2 diabetes accounts for the vast majority of cases out there. And in this type, what we see is the body either isn't producing enough insulin or it's become resistant to its effects.
Oh, okay. So it's like having the key, but the door just won't open.
Yeah. Or maybe there are enough keys, but the locks on the cell doors have become all rusty and difficult to turn.
I see. So the insulin's there, but it's just not doing its job as effectively as it should be.
Precisely. And this can actually happen gradually over time, often without any noticeable symptoms in those early stages, which can make it tricky to catch.
And that's why it's so important to, be aware of those warning signs, those subtle little hints that maybe something's a little bit off with your body. What should people be on the lookout for?
Well, you've probably heard them before, but they are definitely worth repeating. Increased thirst and frequent urination are two biggies. Remember how we were talking about glucose building up in the bloodstream? Well, the body, in a valiant attempt to flush out that excess sugar, sends it packing through your urine, and all those extra trips to the bathroom. Well, your body's basically pulling water from your tissues to make that happen, which leads to dehydration and that insatiable thirst you might be feeling.
So it's like your body's trying to send you a message in a language you don't quite understand.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you have other common symptoms like unexplained weight loss, increased hunger, fatigue, blurry vision, slow healing sores. But here's the thing. These symptoms can be pretty subtle, especially in the beginning, especially with type 2, and they can easily be mistaken for something else entirely.
So you might just brush them off as, oh, I'm just working a little too hard these days, or I need to cut back on the sweets.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it happens all the time. People just kind of write it off. And that's why it's so important to, listen to your body and talk to your doctor if you notice anything off, especially if you have other risk factors for diabetes.
Speaking of risk factors, let's get into that. Who's most likely to develop type 2 diabetes?
Yeah.
What are some of the red flags in someone's medical history or their lifestyle?
Well, genetics definitely play a role. If you have a family history of diabetes, you're statistically more likely to develop it yourself. It's like inheriting, I don't know, a predisposition, but not necessarily a life sentence.
Right, it's not a guarantee.
It's not a guarantee. But here's where things get really interesting. While your genes might lay the groundwork, your lifestyle choices hold a lot of power. We're talking about what you eat, how much you move your body, even how you manage stress. All of those things factor in.
So those family medical history questionnaires at the doctor's office, they're not just a formality.
Yep.
But okay, so that is reassuring to know that we do have some degree of control, even if we have a genetic predisposition. You're saying that our lifestyle choices can really tip the scales in either direction.
Absolutely, they can. Think of it like this. You might inherit a deck of cards, but how you play those cards, that's up to you.
I like that.
And those choices, diet, exercise, stress management, all those things, they can really influence your risk of developing type 2, for sure.
Okay, so we've talked about those scary statistics, the subtle warning signs, all that. But let's say someone's listening and they're thinking, maybe some of this sounds a little bit too familiar. What's the next step? How do doctors actually diagnose diabetes?
Well, it's not like they can just tell by looking at you.
Right, no more house calls.
Right. It involves a little bit of detective work and some specific blood tests. The article mentions a few, but the one you've probably heard of most is the A1C test.
Right, the A1C, that's one that tells you your average blood sugar levels over time. Right.
You got it. Exactly. It's basically like looking back at your blood sugar's diary over the past few months, rather than just, judging it based on one random afternoon.
So it's a more holistic view.
Exactly. It sees the big picture.
So if your A1C is high, that's a pretty clear sign that something's off.
Exactly. It means your blood sugar levels have been consistently elevated, which means, okay, time for a little further investigation here.
Okay, so let's say you get that diagnosis. You're officially, as you might say, part of the diabetes club, which, not the club anyone wants to join, but it's a club with hopefully some good support and resources, right?
Right. And surprisingly good snacks, if you know what I mean.
I appreciate the humor. But seriously, what happens then? You don't just get handed a pamphlet and told, good luck.
No, not at all. Diabetes management is very personalized. It's all about working with your healthcare team, finding a plan that really fits your needs and your lifestyle. There's no one-size-fits-all approach here.
So what might that plan look like? What are some of the cornerstones of really effective diabetes management?
Well, the good news is you don't have to become a health guru overnight. It usually starts with some simple, sustainable changes to your everyday routine.
Give us the actionable advice. What are some of those foundational changes?
All right, well, first and foremost, let's talk about food. And I'm not talking about, deprivation or ditching carbs altogether. It's more about making smart swaps and finding that balance. The article actually highlights the Mediterranean diet as a great example.
Oh, the Mediterranean diet. That's the one with all the, delicious olive oil and colorful veggies.
That's the one. It's not only good for your blood sugar, but it's also great for your heart, your brain, your overall well-being. Think about it. Lots of fresh fruits and veggies, whole grains, lean proteins, healthy fats, minimal processed foods, all that good stuff. It's about nourishing your body.
Yeah, that sounds like a way of eating I could actually get behind. It's not just about what you can't have.
Exactly. It's a lifestyle.
Okay, so food, check. What about exercise? I know it's important for everyone, but how does it specifically help with managing diabetes?
Well, remember how we talked about insulin being that key that unlocks the cells? Think of exercise as giving those keys a little polish. It helps increase your insulin sensitivity, which means it makes it easier for your body to actually use the insulin it's producing.
So the insulin is more effective when you're physically active.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything extreme. You don't need to become a marathon runner overnight.
Right. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Not at all. The article really emphasizes those moderate intensity exercises like brisk walking, swimming, dancing, even just gardening.
Just moving your body.
Exactly.
Finding something you enjoy, something you can stick with.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about food, we've talked about exercise. I feel like we can't really talk about diabetes management without addressing medication. At what point do those lifestyle changes alone just not cut it? And what are some of the medication options that are out there?
That's a great question. For some people with type 2, especially in those early stages, lifestyle changes can really make a huge difference. But for others, and for everyone with type 1 diabetes, medication is essential for managing those blood sugar levels.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those medications.
Yeah.
The article mentions a whole bunch. Metformin, GLP-1 receptor agonists, which, by the way, those just sound like something out of a science fiction movie.
Yeah, no, right.
Like, what even are those?
They do sound futuristic, but they're real and they're making a huge difference for people. So metformin, that's kind of like the trusty sidekick of diabetes medications. It's been around for a while and it's really effective at lowering blood sugar. But those GLP-1 receptor agonists you mentioned, those are kind of like the superheroes of the diabetes medication world.
Okay, so tell us more about the superheroes. What makes them so special?
Well, not only do they help lower blood sugar, but they've also been shown to promote weight loss and protect your heart. So it's like you're getting 3 superpowers for the price of 1.
Okay, that's impressive. Weight loss and heart health, that's a big deal. But I'm guessing, like any superhero, there's got to be a kryptonite or two, right? Side effects, maybe?
You're right, no medication is completely without potential side effects. But the good news is there are a lot of different options out there. It's all about working closely with your doctor to find that medication, or sometimes it's even a combination of medications that really works best for you and your individual needs.
Personalized medicine at its finest.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about medication broadly, but I want to touch on insulin therapy specifically. For people who require insulin therapy, it feels like there's a whole other level of management there. What are the key takeaways when it comes to insulin therapy?
Yeah, so insulin therapy has come a long way, even in recent years. Remember how we were talking about insulin being that key that unlocks the cells? Well, for people with type 1 diabetes and some people with type 2, their bodies either aren't producing enough of those keys or the keys just aren't quite fitting those locks anymore. So we need to provide those keys externally.
So insulin therapy is basically, it's replenishing the body's insulin supply, like giving it what it needs from an outside source.
Exactly. And just like you have different keys for different things, you have one for your front door, one for your car, one for that old antique chest in the attic.
Right, they're not all the same.
They're not all the same. Well, there are different types of insulin too, and they each have their own onset and their own duration of action. So again, it's about finding the right type of insulin, or sometimes it's even a combination of insulins to really match your needs and your lifestyle.
And that's where I imagine technology starts to play a role as well.
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing just amazing advancements in insulin delivery these days. You have insulin pens for on-the-go convenience, insulin pumps for this continuous, personalized insulin delivery.
It's like having a miniaturized pharmacy right there with you.
Exactly. It's pretty incredible.
And speaking of technology, we have to talk about continuous glucose monitors, or CGMs, as I feel like everyone's calling them these days. I'm hearing more and more about these. What's the deal with CGMs, and how are they changing the game for people with diabetes?
Well, imagine having this tiny little sensor, almost like a little guardian angel, that's constantly monitoring your blood sugar levels day and night.
Yeah.
That's essentially what a CGM does.
Wow. So you don't have to constantly be pricking your finger.
No, it's amazing. It's like having this personal blood sugar bodyguard, always on the lookout for any dangerous highs or lows.
That sounds incredibly helpful, especially for avoiding those sudden drops in blood sugar, which, can be so scary for people.
Oh, absolutely. And they can happen so fast.
Hmm.
But CGMs actually give you real-time alerts, which empowers you to take action before those blood sugar levels get out of control.
Oh, that's amazing. So it gives you that heads up.
It does. And not only that, but it also offers these really valuable insights into your blood sugar trends and patterns, which can be super helpful in fine-tuning your diabetes management plan over time.
So it's not just about reacting to your blood sugar levels in the moment. It's about really understanding those long-term patterns and making more proactive decisions.
Right. Precisely.
Wow. And I imagine, the technology is only getting better and better, too.
Oh, absolutely. Smartphone apps, wearable devices, they're all becoming increasingly integrated with CGMs, which just gives you even more data and control right at your fingertips.
It's pretty incredible. It's like having this personalized diabetes management team available 24/7.
It really is.
But even with all of these advancements in, the treatments, the technology, we have to remember that there's also the emotional side of living with a chronic condition like diabetes.
Yeah.
That's got to be really tough. It's one thing to, test your blood sugar and take your medication.
Yeah.
But it's a whole other thing to deal with the mental and emotional side of it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's got to be exhausting.
It really is. And I think it's easy to underestimate that emotional toll of living with any chronic condition, but diabetes especially. It's the daily burden of checking your blood sugar, planning your meals, taking your medication. It's like a full-time job on top of everything else you're doing.
It really is. It's
Yeah.
like having this invisible to-do list that never really goes away.
It never goes away. And then you
Well,
add on top of that, the worry, the fear of complications, maybe some guilt if your blood sugar isn't perfect, the pressure to make those healthy choices all the time. It's a lot. It's no wonder people experience what the article calls diabetes distress.
diabetes distress, it's a real thing. So how do we help people cope with that? What are some strategies that people can use to, ride those waves, navigate those emotional ups and downs that can come with diabetes?
Well, I think the first step is just acknowledging that, it's okay to not be okay all the time.
Yeah, it's okay to have a bad day.
It is. You're not a failure if your blood sugar spikes after a stressful day or you slip up and have a piece of cake at a birthday party.
All right, you're not a robot.
Exactly. You're human. And it's so important to prioritize your mental and emotional well-being just as much as your physical health. That might mean things like practicing mindfulness, maybe trying some meditation or deep breathing exercises, spending time in nature.
Yeah, just taking care of yourself.
Exactly.
The article also mentioned building a support system.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. When you're facing a challenge like diabetes, having people you can lean on, people who get it, who understand what you're going through, it can make all the difference. And family and friends can be incredible sources of support, of course, but connecting with others who are going through the same thing, who are walking that same path, it's so empowering.
Yeah, there's something about that shared experience.
There really is. It's that I get it that you can't replicate. And there are so many ways to find that connection now, too. You've got support groups, online communities, forums. They all offer the space to share your experiences, to gain new perspectives, and to just realize, hey, you're not alone in this.
Find your people.
Find your people, exactly.
And sometimes, navigating those emotional waters, it requires a bit more than a listening ear. There shouldn't be any shame in that, right? Like seeking professional help, that's not a sign of weakness.
Not at all. In fact, I would say it's a sign of strength.
Absolutely.
The sign of self-awareness. Mental health professionals, they can really give you the tools and the techniques to manage that stress, that anxiety, those negative thought patterns that, let's be honest, can really take over when you're dealing with a chronic condition.
Yeah. It's like having a personal trainer, but for your mind.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of really important but serious stuff today. Let's end on a hopeful note. What about the future of diabetes care? Feels like we're really on the cusp of something big. What has you most excited?
Oh, there's so much to be excited about. I mean, the pace of innovation right now is it's mind-blowing. Like with those CGMs we were talking about, those are only getting smaller. They're getting smarter. They're becoming more and more integrated with other devices. We're talking closed-loop systems, what some people are calling the artificial pancreas, which can actually automatically adjust insulin delivery based on your blood sugar levels in real time.
Wow, so it takes the guesswork out of it.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It really is.
And, it's not just about managing diabetes anymore either. Researchers are actually exploring gene editing techniques that could potentially correct the genetic defects that can lead to diabetes in the first place.
Wow. So not just managing symptoms, but addressing the root cause.
Exactly. Imagine that.
That would be incredible. What about that whole, I've been hearing whispers about a diabetes vaccine. Is that really something that could be on the horizon?
It's still early days. It's still in the research phase. But the progress that's being made is really exciting. The idea is that a vaccine could potentially prevent that autoimmune attack that leads to type 1 diabetes. If that were to actually happen, it could mean a future where, for all intents and purposes, type 1 diabetes is a thing of the past.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay, I have to ask about this too because I feel like it's everywhere right now. All this talk about the gut microbiome. How does that play into diabetes?
You're right. Everyone's talking about the microbiome these days. It's like this whole other world living inside of us. And it turns out that those gut bacteria, they play a really crucial role in our metabolic health. So researchers are looking into whether manipulating that microbiome, maybe through things like probiotics, could help prevent or even reverse type 2 diabetes.
So you're saying we might be managing our diabetes with like a specially formulated yogurt one day?
Hey, it's not as crazy as it sounds. And speaking of reversing diabetes, we're actually seeing some really remarkable results with things like intensive lifestyle interventions, things like significant weight loss through bariatric surgery or through very low calorie diets. For some people with type 2 diabetes, remission, it's not just a pipe dream anymore, it's becoming a real possibility.
That is incredibly hopeful. It's amazing to think about, we might be talking about diabetes prevention and even reversal just as readily as we talk about managing it today, hopefully soon. This whole conversation, this deep dive into understanding diabetes in 2024 from the Advocate Voice, it's been really eye-opening.
It really highlights just how dynamic this field is. There's a lot to look forward to.
There is. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling very optimistic after this conversation. And for our listeners, if you're as intrigued as we are, we definitely encourage you to check out the full article over at the Advocate Voice. It's a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to really stay informed about the absolute latest in diabetes research and care. And as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to ponder. If researchers could harness the power of gene editing to, as you said, address the root cause of diabetes, what other diseases might we one day be able to prevent or even cure? Until next time, stay curious.